The most sensitive souls are not weak. They are the guardians of the collective wound. Carl Jung. There are people who walk through the world with open hearts. They sense what others hide. They feel the room before a single word is spoken. And though they often remain silent, they carry the emotional weight of everyone around them. These are the highly sensitive ones, the empaths, the soul listeners, the emotional alchemists. You may be one of them. And if you are, chances are, you've suffered in silence. You've probably heard it all before. You're too emotional. Don't take it so personally. You need to toughen up. But what if your sensitivity isn't a flaw? What if it's a portal? Carl Jung believed that the sensitive person is not merely reacting to their own life. They are often tuning in to the collective unconscious, that deep psychic ocean beneath society's surface. And in this vast reservoir live the emotions, traumas, and archetypal wounds of humanity itself. To be sensitive, Jung suggested, is to be porous, not weak, but open, not dramatic, but deeply attuned to the suffering that most people bury. And yet, this gift comes at a price, because the modern world wasn't made for you. It rewards productivity, not presence. It glorifies armor, not openness. And it silences those who feel too much, because deep feeling is a threat to the machine. This video is a tribute to those who feel, to those who carry invisible burdens with quiet grace, to those who haven't yet realized that their pain is also their power. Over the next few chapters, we'll explore what it truly means to be sensitive in a numb world. Through the lens of Carl Jung's hidden wisdom, we'll journey into the psychology of the empathic soul, the shadow side of deep perception, and how to stop absorbing what was never yours to carry. If you've ever felt like an alien on this earth, if you've ever cried without knowing why, if you've ever longed for peace in a chaotic world, stay with us. Your sensitivity is not your enemy. It may be the most sacred thing about you. If you resonate with this message so far, consider subscribing. This channel is a home for seekers, deep thinkers, and quiet warriors of the soul. The invisible wound of the sensitive. There is a kind of pain that doesn't bleed. No bruises, no scars, no evidence, but it exists quietly, persistently in the hearts of the sensitive. Highly sensitive people walk through life with no armor. They feel before they think. They notice everything. The tone behind the words, the tremble in a friend's voice, the sadness behind a stranger's smile. It's like having skin turned inside out, raw, exposed, unfiltered. But what no one sees is the cost of that perception. From a young age, the sensitive child learns to adapt, not by becoming louder, but by becoming quieter. They shrink themselves, not to gain attention, but to avoid disturbing the emotional balance around them. They become attuned to others' feelings, often ignoring their own. Jung called this process identification with the other. The sensitive person unconsciously merges with those around them, becoming a psychic sponge, absorbing not just moods but entire emotional landscapes. And in that silent absorption, they begin to disappear. They become what others need, the peacemaker, the listener, the emotional caregiver, the one who always understands, even when no one understands them. But here lies the invisible wound. When your role becomes your identity, you lose access to your own truth. Many highly sensitive people report feeling disconnected from themselves, not because they lack a self, but because their self has been drowned in the needs of others. They cry for reasons they can't explain. They retreat, not because they're weak, but because the world is too loud, too fast, too full. They say yes when their body screams no, just to keep the peace. This is not kindness. This is survival. They don't want to be praised. They want to be seen. They want someone to notice the fatigue behind their eyes, the tension in their shoulders, the silence that screams louder than words ever could. Carl Jung believed that the psyche speaks in symbols, And the sensitive person often becomes the symbol bearer for the collective. They feel things before the group does. They see the storm on the horizon long before the clouds gather. And yet, their insight is often dismissed as overreacting or being too sensitive. But what if this isn't a flaw? What if it's an ancient role? In many indigenous cultures, the most sensitive were considered seers. They were the shamans, the dreamers, the oracles. Their ability to feel deeply was not pathologized. It was revered. Jung would argue that our modern culture has lost this reverence. Instead of honoring sensitivity, we medicate it. Instead of listening to our intuitive wounds, we silence them. And so, the sensitive soul suffers in silence, not because they're broken, but because they've been taught to hide what is most sacred in them. Here's the paradox. The more sensitive you are, the more likely you are to attract those who are not. You become the emotional anchor for those adrift, and while they feel better around you, you leave feeling drained, empty, confused. This is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to protect yourself. Sensitivity is not about weakness, it's about depth. It's about resonance. It's the ability to perceive the soul of things, to notice the nuances others miss. But that power must be grounded, because an unprotected empath becomes a martyr. And Jung warned us, when we ignore the voice of the soul, the shadow takes over. Unprocessed sensitivity can turn into anxiety, depression, and somatic illness. Not because you're defective, but because your inner world is overloaded with emotion that was never meant to be yours. The first step in healing this invisible wound is recognition. To say out loud, yes, I feel everything. And that is not a crime. To stop apologizing for your emotional range. To stop shrinking so others can remain comfortable. To reclaim your space, not with force, but with truth. If this resonates with you, pause here and subscribe. You're not alone in your depth, and you're not too much. You are exactly enough, just not in a world that knows how to hold it. The wound is real, but so is the wisdom on the other side of it. The weight of the collective soul. There are moments in life when the pain we carry doesn't seem to belong to us. We wake up heavy with no clear reason. We feel grief that seems to come from nowhere. We walk through the world with a sorrow that can't be named. Carl Jung believed this was no coincidence. According to Jung, we are not isolated beings floating in a vacuum of individuality. We are part of a great psychic field, what he called the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir beneath the surface of our personal mind, where the memories, emotions, and archetypes of humanity reside. And some people are more open to it than others. The highly sensitive individual is not just tuned in to their own psyche. They are plugged into the emotional frequency of the entire human tribe. They feel the ripple of collective trauma, long before others even notice the water is moving. Jung called this the archetype of the wounded healer. It's the soul who feels not only for themselves, but for everyone. The one who carries a sadness that predates their childhood. The one who senses ancestral echoes in their own suffering. This kind of psychic inheritance is not metaphorical, it is real. It shows up in dreams, in symptoms, in sudden floods of emotion. You may be feeling the pain of a lineage. You may be holding the grief of a culture. You may be the vessel through which something ancient is asking to be healed. And that is no small task. Sensitive people are often born into families or systems that are emotionally repressed. They become the first to feel what everyone else avoids. The silence, the rage, the grief, all of it finds a way through the sensitive soul. Not because they chose it, but because the unconscious chose them. In Jungian psychology, this is not a punishment, it is a calling. The one who suffers is often the one who transforms, and the one who transforms becomes the guide. But let's be honest, Before any light is found, the burden can feel unbearable. You may isolate yourself not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Crowds may feel like too much. Small talk might exhaust you. Violent news, cruelty, injustice, they all land in your body like physical blows. You are not fragile. You are sensitive to the soul of the world. But without protection, you become a lightning rod for pain. That's why Jung warned of identification with the archetype. If the wounded healer becomes only the wound, they lose themselves. They become stuck in the suffering, never crossing the threshold into meaning. To carry the weight of the collective soul, you must learn to separate what is yours from what is not. You must develop boundaries that are not walls, but sacred filters. You must witness the pain without becoming the pain. Ritual helps, solitude helps, dream work helps. Nature, art, shadow, journaling, these are not luxuries but survival tools for the soul. When you begin to honor your sensitivity as a spiritual responsibility, not a defect, everything changes. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and begin asking, "What is trying to move through me?" This shift is everything, because the sensitive person, when unconscious, becomes consumed by the world's chaos. But the sensitive person, when conscious, becomes a vessel for healing. Jung believed we must make the darkness conscious. And you, yes you, may be the one bringing light to something that's been buried for generations. But remember, you don't have to carry it all. You are not the savior. You are not responsible for fixing the world. You are simply being asked to transmute what passes through you, with love, with boundaries, with care. If this part touched something in you, now is the time to subscribe. This space is for the soul bearers, the quiet healers, the ones who walk between worlds. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are just awake in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Let that be your strength, not your shame. Turning pain into power. Pain can shatter, but it can also shape. And for the highly sensitive person, pain is rarely just physical or situational. It is existential. It reaches deep into the psyche, forcing the soul to confront what most people run from. But here is the paradox Jung understood better than most. The wound is the way. In Jungian psychology, transformation does not come by avoiding darkness. It comes by walking straight into it. And for those who feel deeply, life will offer no shortage of invitations. At first, pain feels like an invader, a force you didn't ask for, a weight you didn't choose. But over time, if met with presence and courage, pain reveals its secret. It's a threshold, a passage. Carl Jung wrote, "Only the wounded physician heals." This means that our suffering, once integrated, becomes a source of deep wisdom, not intellectual knowledge, but felt truth. And the person who has lived through emotional storms becomes a lighthouse for others still caught in the waves. But how does this transformation happen? The first step is acknowledgement. You must be willing to say, "Yes, I feel too much, and I will no longer apologize for it." This is not pride, it is a reclamation of what was always sacred. The second step is discernment. Not everything you feel belongs to you. Your body, your mind, your heart. They've been absorbing stories for years. It's time to separate your soul's truth from the noise of the world. How? Jung would say, turn inward. Listen to your dreams. Notice what repeats. The symbols, the patterns, the quiet urges of the unconscious. The soul speaks in metaphor, but it always tells the truth. Create space for your inner life. This might mean solitude. It might mean saying no to draining relationships. It might mean journaling every day, or walking in nature, or letting yourself cry without a reason. This is not weakness. This is sacred maintenance. Because when you honor your pain, something begins to shift. You stop leaking energy into people who don't value you. You stop abandoning yourself for the sake of harmony, and you begin to feel a quiet, unfamiliar sensation. Power. Not the power of control, not the power of dominance, but the power of presence. The power of knowing who you are, even when the world doesn't understand. Highly sensitive people often fear they are too much, too intense, too emotional. But Jung would say, you are precisely what the world is missing. You are the antidote to numbness. The reminder that feeling is not failure, it is aliveness. But this aliveness must be held with structure. Your nervous system needs rest. Your inner child needs safety. Your soul needs boundaries, not as a rejection of others, but as a devotion to your own sacred ground. Begin saying, this is not mine to carry. Begin asking, does this serve my energy or drain it? And begin believing, my sensitivity is a compass, not a curse. Because once the sensitive person stops fighting their nature, they become unstoppable. They become healers, creators, bringers of depth in a culture obsessed with surfaces. They begin to feel everything without drowning in it. They begin to love deeply without losing themselves. They begin to live fully, not despite their sensitivity, but because of it. And that is the alchemy, from pain to power, from chaos to clarity, from invisible suffering to conscious service. If this awakening has stirred something in you, now is the time to subscribe. This is a space for transformation, for reclaiming the forgotten parts of the soul. Remember, you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't hold depth. Now it's your time to feel, to protect, to rise. Honoring your sensitivity in a numb world. In a world that rewards speed, noise, and certainty, sensitivity is an act of quiet rebellion. It's not easy being the one who feels, who sees what others ignore, who aches not just for themselves, but for the world. But maybe, just maybe, you were never meant to fit into this world as it is. Maybe you were meant to help shape it into something more alive, more human. Carl Jung believed that our wholeness depends on our willingness to embrace the shadow, and sensitivity, when denied, becomes part of that shadow. It turns inward, becomes shame, becomes silence. But when honored, it becomes soul. The truth is, your sensitivity isn't going anywhere. You can numb it, you can suppress it, you can try to become what others expect of you, but the cost is your vitality. You don't need to harden. You need to root, to build an inner life strong enough to hold your sensitivity, to create rituals that protect your energy, to surround yourself with people who understand depth, not just performance. You deserve space to rest. You deserve language for what you feel. You deserve to be met, not just managed. And if that space doesn't exist around you, then let this be the beginning of its creation, because the world needs you. It needs the artists, the listeners, the feelers, the ones who cry at the news, who pause to watch the sunset, who sense when something is off, even if no one else sees it. You are not broken. You are intact in a fractured culture. And your path is not one of escape, but of integration. So take this moment to breathe, to thank your body for feeling, to thank your psyche for surviving, to thank your soul for staying open in a world that asks you to shut down. Then ask yourself gently, how can I honor my sensitivity today? Maybe it's silence, maybe it's art, maybe it's saying no, maybe it's crying without shame. Whatever it is, trust it. And if this video helped name something inside you, subscribe now, not for the algorithm, but for the alignment, so that you can return to this space when the world feels heavy again. This is your reminder. You are not alone in your depth. You are not strange for feeling everything. You are not weak for being open. You are part of a quiet revolution, one that begins not with noise, but with the courage to feel and keep feeling, even when the world forgets how.